Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Siebert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
Welcome to Relationships Inside Out, where today we're going to talk about how teamwork makes the dream work.
We're going to be talking about specifically romantic relationships, but this could be across context, right? It could be with family, parent-child. Today we're focusing on romantic partnerships.
Yikes.
It's a tough one because of a few things, at least what comes to my mind. When we think about teamwork, I often, I'm sure you do too as a couples therapist, here I do everything. My partner does nothing. And so there's that. Is there reciprocity? Is there a sense of everything has to be equal? If I do the dishes, you do the dishes. If I help with the kids in this way, you help with the kids in this way. So that can be a challenge to teamwork. And time. Do we both have time to show up in the ways we want to? Do we both have a sense of what it would look like if we were a team? It gets really complicated.
It's tough. And there's actually this card deck called Fair Play Cards. And there's, I think, a book on it. And what I like about it is that, for me, it elucidated this idea that not every task is weighted equally.
Mm-hmm.
And so when working with couples, you often see, I'm always doing this, this, and this, and this, right? And then you have them talk about, what do? You write them down, like, what's happening? And they're like, oh, I didn't realize you did that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here's a common example. In a heterosexual relationship, it was, oh, I didn't know you did all the car maintenance and the oil changes and made sure our tires were good and replaced the filters in the fridge and these things that necessarily aren't daily, but they're really important. Whereas, the wife in this relationship was more on the daily stuff. And that might be more taxing. So it's this idea of what really is happening. Like, if you look at the overall picture of the dream, what's the dream? That we successfully manage this household and parent kids. What are the tasks, right? Because you can't have, what's that saying? Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Not everyone could be the cook. Someone else has to do something else. But you don't see that in people's conceptualization of that tit for tat. We've had a relationship on tit for tat. We've had an episode on tit for tat. And it can't be this, if I do the dishes, you do the dishes all the time.
It can't. There's no way to have everything perfectly equitable. The other pieces you're talking about that doesn't often get measured, but plays a role in teamwork is the mental burden.
Yeah.
Who's keeping track of when appointments need to be made, what tasks need to be done? For travel, what do we need to pack, plan, do the things, right?
Yep.
The immeasurable, the pieces that float on my brain. I am definitely more of the mental partner than my husband. He's more of the physical. There's physical labor to be done. He's our man.
Yeah.
If there is something that needs to be kept track of, appointments made, that's my brain. I've got it on lock, right? But notice here, what I'm not saying is we both need to carry the full mental burden or we both need to do all the physical labor. A big piece of teamwork is playing into our partner's strengths.
Yeah.
It isn't forcing my husband to be detail-oriented and organized and specific. For his brain and his type of neurodivergence, it is never going to happen. And as his partner of 20 years, there have been moments where I wanted it to and tried to force it, and it failed, and it led to fighting and stress on his end. And then there comes this point when I accepted that's just not his brain. So how can we do it different, right? Okay, if I have to keep track of all the mental pieces, what can he take on so I have the capacity to take on the mental pieces?
Or what are they taking on already?
Facts.
Finances, Kim.
Okay, sir. And he does. He takes care of all our finances. And I think of it as a small job. It's not a small job.
And that's the thing is we don't see the effort if we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And granted, there are some daily grind stuff. I think about parents with new kids.
Oof.
Like, who's washing all the bottles?
Yes.
That's a daily grind. That's a pain in the ass. But then
who's doing the diapers,
who's doing
cleanup,
the diapers?
the laundry?
And that's the thing is it gets really hard not to go in this tit for tat. So when we have these conversations, just try to be as objective as possible. Okay, these are things I'm doing. This is what they're doing. And granted, it doesn't mean you can't cross over. It doesn't mean you can't switch. Okay, you do this for a week. I need a break. I'll do X in response. You can do this.
Or if someone's sick, taking over their tasks. It happens.
Yeah. The important piece I think we're really highlighting here is the expectation of what our partner does based on what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fair because it may not be their strength.
Mm-hmm.
I think about parenting. I've had couples where one partner's really good at all the logistical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is excellent and entertaining.
A creative play. Mm-hmm.
That other partner might not value the play,
Mm-hmm.
but how important is that? Because if they're not doing that, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
The kids are all over the place. They're distracting. So that's another piece, is the value that you put on your partners, and try your best not to devalue it, but understand what it brings to the overall dream. And this is why we have to be objective. Because you can't compare dishes to maybe, like, I don't know, a once a year taxes, right?
Christmas lights.
Yeah, or Christmas lights. They can, they got to be on the same playing field. And a lot of times you see that there's like an unfair comparison with the partners.
It's really difficult to accept that our partner may or may not be able to engage in the things we engage in, right? But a core piece of teamwork, and this is true of even sports teams, what are your strengths? How do we utilize your strengths rather than trying to force you through your weaknesses? Doesn't mean that you can't grow, right? It doesn't mean my husband can't do some of the organizing or some of the detailed stuff, but I'm not going to count on him to do all of it because it's not his strength and it's never going to be.
Yeah.
My strength is not spontaneity or creativity. It's just not. If he's relying on me for that piece, I'm going to fail 100% of the time. So how do I encourage him to lean in his strength of spontaneity and creativity while I lean into mine? And how are those, to your point, equally valued? They're both important. They're just different.
This is what I love this conversation. I think it should happen. And again, do it without tit for tat. But the reason why I like it is because it fosters a lot of positivity, because you're exploring each other's strengths. You're sitting down and having a conversation of like, okay, what do you feel your strengths are? Oh, I'm very spontaneous. Like, I like doing this. I find that I do this. And when somebody is a part of the plan, it holds us more accountable.
Sure.
So when you're developing this together, it feels like, oh, I have ownership on this. I need to do this, rather than just allocating your partner to go do stuff because you're exhausted and they should, keyword should, be doing this, X, Y, Z. And it's frustrating because you see partners who get tunnel vision, right? You get in the same routine where everybody's doing what they're doing and it's just kind of an automatic. And then it's like, oh, you never do this. You never do dishes. And you completely forget that, oh, they're cooking all the meals all the time. They're bringing home the finances and budgeting everything. Or we forget what they're doing because we don't see it.
They're doing all the chauffeuring between kids' sports and activities and whatever else. They're managing the school pieces. There's so many of these hidden tasks, to your point, of it's not all obvious, like, is the dishwasher unloaded?
Right.
Some of it is deeply hidden, right? They're in charge of managing family dynamics. They're in charge of, like, I call myself the magic creator in our house. I'm in charge of all the magic, meaning I plan birthday parties and gifts. I plan for Santa. I decorate for the holidays. I create the magic, but my husband is just as important, right? He is planning out the finances for me to do that. He is entertaining the kids while I'm decorating. He is giving input into what he thinks could be good for our daughter's birthday. He's also doing other things like yard care and hanging the Christmas lights. It's acknowledging his piece, even if it's behind the scenes of the magic.
Yeah.
Because without him, me being able to do all those things would be impossible.
And him communicating with that cleaners potentially, right?
Yeah.
Behind the magic. Sorry, I have a hard time like not picturing you in like this like wizard outfit.
Maybe I am in a wizard outfit, Greg.
I'm trying to think of an example with the couples where because I guess what's coming up for me, which is trouble, is this one partner. And when I say one partner, there's this personality type that I've seen over the last 10 years where they have a very, very hard time seeing behind the scenes stuff.
Yes. Because
it's not the readily like visible stuff. And that's what gets lost so much in translation when we're sitting down and trying to figure out who's doing what. Is that's all the forgotten stuff. And that's where the conflict largely resides. Because there is a partner, typically the female in heterosexual relationships, and even not, there's still one partner in same-sex relationships that holds this checklist. And the checklist for the other partner, like for me, Taylor holds that. But I feel like some things on the list aren't necessary. But she's still holding that mental load that impacts dynamics that she feels is more, right? So it's kind of feeling like what's necessary, why is that important to you? And like really having an honest discussion of where your values are and how you can contribute or not, and why that's important, or even how you can support that for your partner.
I love that you bring that up because part of teamwork is buying in to what your partner thinks is necessary, even if you don't. Right? Like I'll hear people
No.
say, it doesn't matter to me, or that's dumb. And I add the part of the sentence to you, right? It may be dumb to you. It may be unimportant to you. It doesn't mean that it's unimportant to your partner. And because of that, if it's important to them, doing our best to also make it important to us, or at least showing support for that. Right? Just because my assessment is that's a stupid task, that's a stupid idea, doesn't mean it actually is, right? And so teamwork is also creating space for those ridiculous things that might be on the list.
You mean the language of you shouldn't be stressed about that.
Oh my gosh.
So I will say
I
that
can't.
I will say that there's a fine line with this.
Yeah.
Because there are issues where one partner is OCD or neurotic.
Are you calling me out?
No. So but there's an issue where like you have a partner who might be OCD or neurotic where everything is important, and that puts a lot of strain on the partner.
True.
And so you have to figure out like, okay, no, this is a little too much. We have to talk about dialing back, or I mean
priorities. What are we starting with? What are we ending with?
But here's the thing is someone who's OCD or neurotic, everything's a priority. Everything's important to me.
Urgent.
And urgent. And typically this is what you see. The one who's more anxious, and I'm putting air quotes if you can't see me, if you're listening, is does all the work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's, well, if you're more anxious, you're more likely going to have to do those things because you can't stand letting the dishes go for 6 hours or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So having a conversation of what's necessary, right? Oh, you left the sponge dirty in the sink. That's a little too much, maybe. Right. So you're going to get mad about that. And then they have a certain spot where the sponge has to go, or every time you get out of the shower, you get to squeegee it or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. These are examples over the last 10 years. And it's like, if your partner's okay with that, fine. But, at the same time, I can see where it's not fine with them.
Sure.
And we have to work on that, which is very hard because now we're dealing with individual psychopathology.
Sure.
That's playing a role here. So there is a fine line when we talk about respecting what's important to our partner and understanding that maybe there's something else going on here because everything is just so stressful.
And even with that point, right, with laundry, I like things folded a certain way. My husband will help with laundry when I create space for him to do so. But that's the important language right there. I have to create space for him. I can't stand over him and hover on him.
Yeah.
I can't tell him he did it wrong. If he's going to help me and I let him in, great. But if I'm not going to, if I'm going to be really critical, I have to accept the responsibility of that is now my chore. Unless I can soften a bit to my partner, it's mine.
Yeah.
If I want things a very particular way or meticulous way, I tell partners, if that's what you want, cool. But then you have to take that on. You can't set your partner up for failure if they can't meet your needs or expectations, but it's super important to you, if that makes sense.
You cannot micromanage.
No.
So that's
once you give up a task, you have to give it up 100%.
Yeah.
Not I'm giving it to you and then I'm going to breathe down your neck. I'm giving it up. Right?
Yeah.
And it's theirs to take however they so choose.
Well, and that's why I love the fair play cards. It's a good starting point. There's a lot of tasks in there you don't think of.
Mm-hmm.
That you can talk about as a couple. But while talking about it, you're saying who gets what card, and some of them in the card deck don't apply to you at this time. Maybe you don't have a kid, or maybe you don't have a dog or something. But when you're talking about this, it also is having you have a conversation of what do you think is reasonable in doing this task. So, for example, oh, you're taking on the trash and you might agree to change every week, or you might agree to keep one card for a month, and then the other ones you change a week. You can figure out how you want to do this. But say trash. Okay, are you okay with the trash going up to the top of the bin? Or are you okay with it overflowing? And you kind of negotiate what's okay. Or like same with laundry, like using your example. Okay, so if you do laundry, are you okay with it sitting in the washer wet soaking for a day? Or, how do you want them folded?
Do we want it done every day?
Once a week? Frequency. So you talk about it, but you're giving the partner who's not doing it some input, because you don't want them to have like a mental breakdown because it's like completely erratic, right?
Sure.
You're putting colors in with the whites and it just turns everything pink. But ultimately you have to give them the control and to not micromanage it. And if you're going to, you better take that card.
And again, playing to strengths. If I know my strength is that, I'm going to take it every time. My husband's strength is cooking, not mine. I suck at cooking. So he's going to take that card every time. And that's okay. Him and I have negotiated that where that feels equitable and again, plays to our strengths. When I'm cooking, I'm anxious. I'm so worried it's going to come out inedible. For him, when he's doing laundry, it's overwhelming. So it's okay that we play to our strengths, right? Some things we may alternate or do kind of hodgepodge of, oh, there's some dishes in the sink. Whoever has time, get to it. But other things, play to your strengths. There's nothing wrong with me doing laundry all the time. But what I can't do is then weaponize it. I can't look at my partner and say, you never do the laundry. Because our agreement was I would be doing the laundry.
Yeah.
Just like he can't look at me and say, you never do the cooking.
Yeah.
Now, Dooley, if he's like, hey, Kim, I need a break from cooking, that is okay too.
Yeah.
Or, hey, Chris, can you take this little laundry? I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
That is okay. But it's communication about it.
Yeah. If you need to sit down and have a State of the Union once a month and renegotiate what tasks and where you're at, that's fine too.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a little trick. I hope my wife's not listening to this one.
Now I'm going to tell her to listen to it.
When you recognize, especially when you sit down and think about this after this episode, what strengths do my partner have? If they're doing something that you know you don't want to do and they're really good at it, praise them. Praise them. Oh, you're so good at cooking.
Okay, what does Taylor do that you don't want to do, Greg?
You're really good at changing diapers. I don't know why. When you put them on, there's just no blowouts. His diaper rash is so much better when you do it. You're amazing. But just like you want to give validation because it feels good,
Yes.
right? I mean, because it is already tough doing the same thing. And like, I have a hard time with redundancy, but if there's something that Taylor knows that I do, it motivates me even more when she notices it. But a lot of times, a lot of this goes unnoticed between partners because we get in this automatic routine. So part of this process is not only recognizing each other's strengths, but validating and like praising them for doing it because you want to know that that's being noticed and appreciated. Otherwise, it's hard to stay motivated to do it.
I thank my husband every night for cooking dinner. It's easy to just assume he's going to do it because he is going to do it. But I can thank him every day and mean it. Not just like,
I was going to say, is it just thanks? Hey, thanks for cooking tonight.
It's looking at my partner, eye contact. Hey, thank you so much. This chicken is delicious. It's not, well, if I were cooking, I would have. Right? It's really telling him I care every time he does it. When he mows the yard, thank you so much for mowing the yard. It looks beautiful.
Yeah.
It takes, 2 seconds?
Holy shit, the yard looks amazing. Thanks. Oh yeah, I'm gonna go out there and now I'm gonna go out.
That feels real good.
I'm going out with scissors to cut it and make it even. Well, and that validation feels so good when you hear it. Like for my wife, I might thank her multiple times. Some because I want to, others is because I forgot I thanked her, so I'll thank her again. It's my short-term memories shit.
You are getting old, but it's fine.
But it benefits because even if it's like a quick thank you, it's like, hey, thank you, and then 5 minutes later, thank you again. Like this is really good and it's important. I don't know of another way for myself that would keep me motivated if it wasn't noticed. That's just me. And some partners, and especially in heterosexual relationships, I've noticed this, where the female partner will complain that the male always needs validation for the tasks.
Attaboys.
Yeah, and it's like there's some truth to that. And it's kind of like, well, why do you need it? You should just do it because it's part of the family. And then I also look at more of the culture of like, men typically in the United States are socialized to just work and provide for the family. Even though times have changed, that's still the cultural narrative. So when you're at home and kind of the incentive is like, I know society wants my wife to do these things and I'm doing it and taking over because I want her, and that narrative is still driving it, which sucks because times have changed where there's more egalitarian in households typically. So it's kind of this battle of like, yeah, you shouldn't always have to give kudos, but at the same time, I understand that there's a strong narrative that plays that this task isn't something that is deemed necessary for a male to do. Typically, right? Stereotypically.
Or even if it is deemed necessary, right? Even if it's him going to work or in a stereotypical way, female helping with the kids. Thank you so much for helping Johnny go to the bathroom or whatever. It's not, and I hear what you just said from people all the time of, but they should just do it. I shouldn't have to say thank you.
Oh, the assumption.
Who cares? It takes you 2 seconds. It doesn't hurt you to say it. Just say thank
Well,
you.
they don't say thank you to me. Well, then let's talk about reciprocity.
It absolutely chaps my ass when I hear people say that of, well, I shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
But you should. You guys are partners.
We're shitting on you right now.
You should be showing love to one another. It takes 0 effort at all to say, thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
Done.
And say,
But
so
it goes miles.
here's an example too of how it might be approached is, hey, I did the dishes. Did you notice? Yes. Like, thank you so much. I appreciate it. What are your thoughts on maybe doing that like 3 times this week, or in the next couple of weeks, do it like more times?
Would you mind doing it on Wednesday when I have karate with the kids?
Well, just normalize it to where it becomes a normal part of the process.
Right.
Because initially those social narratives are very strong,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, men, you work and provide for family or you're a loser. There's no other expectations, even child rearing, right? Men typically unconsciously take a back seat. Oh yeah, you feed or you wipe the diaper. Like, I don't know. Like, we don't grow up where people are like, hey, hold this baby.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you should nurture. Like, that's not like a quality that typically there's plenty of men that have been raised that way,
Sure,
but
sure.
stereotypically aren't like nurturing, right? A lot of men, like, how many men babysit?
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot. I mean, some do, but not a lot because we're not comfortable. It's like weird, or like there's social narrative of like, wait, you like kids?
Right.
And so there's just a lot playing there that it's not a personality trait. It's cultural. And we're fighting those barriers because what's happening in the house is changing, because now women, especially like in certain states, you have to have a dual income house to survive.
Facts.
And, there's that dual role of women that still exists that really sucks. And it's like they go to work and then they come home and are still expected to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's more salient in our culture. And a lot of men are like, oh, and this again is heterosexual relationships. Men are like, oh, crap. Yeah, I'm recognizing that we need to have balance, but we still fall into these baselines.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be conversation around it. There needs to be support around it.
Intention.
And it's figuring out what the strengths are and balancing that, and figuring out what you need help with and integrating each other more into those processes.
Mm-hmm. As part of this too, to that point of women are more, say, child rearing. I hear partners say, I'll watch the kids for you. Drop the words for you. If I can give you any hint, folks, drop it. I did the dishes for you. I did the laundry for you. No, you did them for the house.
Yes.
And so dropping, it seems so like not a big deal, but it's a huge deal, right? If my partner says to me, and he knows better at this point, because it absolutely chaps my ass, of, hey, Kim, I unloaded the dishwasher for you. No, you unloaded the dishwasher. Thank you for doing that. It's not for me because it's not inherently my job. When I tack the words for you, it says that was your job and I did some exception and need a gold star for it.
Yes.
No, get rid of the words for you. It's, hey, I did the dishwasher. Thank you so much, Chris, for doing that.
Yeah.
Right? But there's not this assumption of it's for me or for whomever. We are a unit. At least this is how we look at our house. We are a unit. And so anything that gets done needs to be done for the house, for the family, for our kids, not for me, not for him. And I can still show appreciation. But it seems like a small thing, and it can go a really long way in relationships to drop the words for you.
Well, it's very similar to the you and language.
Yeah.
Even though it's like literally 3 letters, it has a very profound effect when you say you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you did this versus, hey, we, or and this happened, or whatever, right? That you language is so important. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like what you said for our household, because, there are cultural differences in the sense that some households are very okay with certain like matriarchy or patriarchy.
Sure.
And it's just part of the culture who takes on those roles. Right. And if there's disparity in that, then that's a discussion in there and where you line up with those cultural values. Right. But figuring out what works for your household is important.
Absolutely.
We're not here to say what's right and wrong, and there needs to be more balance in the terms of egalitarian. When we say balance, we mean balance for you and what makes sense. That balance may be where, hey, they're doing all the work and I sit at home and do all domestic chores. Like, whatever that is for you, you have to find your balance.
And playing to strengths, right?
Playing to strengths.
Even in a patriarchal household, as it traditionally was, where male works and female stays home with the kids, playing to strengths. Maybe her strengths are with the kids, and that's great. And his strengths are with work. We don't want to reverse them and force into things that are not strengths if we don't have to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean hubby can't sometimes help with kids. It doesn't mean wife can't sometimes work. right? It doesn't mean my husband doesn't do laundry sometimes or I don't cook. But by and large, we're playing to strengths and advocating when we need a break or when we need our
Yeah.
partner to step up in a certain way, right? If I advocate to my partner, I need you to take this on, also reconciling in myself, and he's not going to do it exactly as I do.
Yeah. I want to throw a wrench in like I do every topic.
Oh, golly.
I feel like that's kind of more of a theme now. There are situations and times where a partner gets sick or something happens that they're
Yeah.
not able to carry the weight. It is tough in those times to find balance because it is off. And another partner might take on more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a lot of cases, you might have the privilege to say, well, this isn't permanent. Let's get through this. And when you think about the span of a relationship, it tends to oscillate, right? You're sick and then that's fine. There are cases where this is permanent. And so you're going to have to reevaluate what that looks like. You're going to have to reevaluate what the strengths are now and how you can be a team and still get your needs met and still find balance. For example, somebody who now is not able, like they have, rheumatoid arthritis and they can't do a lot of things that require that dexterity. But the other person doesn't have it in them either. You might have to get outside resources. You might have to just be very creative of how you can create balance. It doesn't just have to be you two. So finding what that is, again, there is no right to a balance. The right is what's working for you.
And I look at choice in that, right? So someone who is chronically ill doesn't have a choice in the illness and thus doesn't have a choice in their capabilities. Is it that they truly don't have a choice, or is it that they just expect you to do all the things, but have the choice to do something different? That can be kind of a barometer of, can I accept this? Can I tolerate this for the long term or not?
Yeah. And that's it's so hard because sometimes you get that where somebody's like, nope, I have this. I can't literally do anything. I mean, if that's the case, okay, and for some partners, I've had it to where they're like, this isn't the relationship for me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's too much for me and I didn't sign up for this. Is the language I typically hear. And it's very sad and heartbreaking, right? Because you get this cultural narrative, at least, in the Christian world, is for sickness and for sickness and in sickness and health, right?
Yeah.
So there's the expectation of like, I should be with them, all the time. And yes, and if it's causing you to be sick and interrupt your health or put you in a bad situation for your own health. Like, I mean, there's a lot of evaluation that needs to happen here of what's meaningful for you. But the important piece before any of those decisions are made is what could a new balance look like?
And are we both invested in that? Or is my partner saying like, no, I'm not willing to change. I'm not willing to find a new balance. That's a hard one, right? If I'm wanting to find a new balance, a new rhythm, and my partner's like, no, I'm good, just sitting on the couch or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to overcome.
And here's one that's kind of tough, and I think it's more maybe the last decade. You can correct me if you feel differently, but is a stay-at-home dad. With women going to work, there's a lot more instances where they're the, in quotes, breadwinner. And it doesn't make sense to have childcare, so then the male's forced to go home. Yeah. But society still says, no, stay-at-home dad, weak, pathetic. That's not okay. That's not accepting, right? So even though it's forced, there's a lot of internal dialogue happening in battle of this dissonance between what needs to happen, because I know conceptually this is important for my family, and also the message from culture of what the hell,
or family or friends around you.
You're supposed to be at work working and providing for your family, and this idea of providing is always financial, not at home and providing care. So you're forcing the situation. So like, what's that balance? How can I support? Because when you're providing balance and support, you also have to understand what are the narratives that are impacting somebody's stress levels doing these things. Like, why is it not okay? Why are they having difficulty? Because that's a big one when you think about a culture narrative, like not okay to be a stay-at-home dad. And
it's huge because that challenges our identity.
Or what culture says our identity should be. And so there's a lot of kickback in couples, and I see a lot of conflict around that one in particular.
It's hard. It's hard to know the exact balance or formula for a family. The key here is communication, communication, communication. Keep talking about it. What may have worked before your first baby isn't going to work after your baby, or after your second baby, your third, or a job switch or health switch or family moving closer. It doesn't matter. These things get shaken up all the time.
Yeah.
So we've got to keep communicating about, hey, with the changes that have recently happened, I'm not feeling as balanced. Can we talk about that?
Not, in the case of the stay-at-home dad, yeah, I make more money than you, or I make more money than, if they're talking to the in-laws, like my son or your son or whatever. Yeah, I make more. I'm the breadwinner, right? Like that internalized in a deeper level. That's not even like, that's not a good way to communicate this stuff. If that's an issue, like, don't bring it up. Let's talk about it. It goes back to what I said about praise and validation. I am so grateful you're staying home with the kids. That's a lot of work. It means so much. Like, I am so grateful that we're able to do this and you're able to do this. That validation is so, so important.
And reverse, even if it's the female at home, right?
Oh, yeah.
How do we allow for equitability in finances? She's staying home, but she's unpaid.
That
right?
is so hard. Well, yeah,
For
even
any partner that stays home,
yeah, I was
that's
gonna say
unpaid,
just even the male unpaid too, right?
it can be really hard for couples to not go into the pattern of, well, I make the money, so I got to choose how to spend it.
Yeah. And this happens in same-sex couples too that I've worked with, where, I mean, these dynamics happen too. And we give a lot of examples from heterosexual relationships, but those dynamics also apply largely in the same sex, because there's still cultural narratives that are at play on an unconscious level of what gender norms are and what roles and like what our identity is and what we might fit into. And that language is still happening within the same-sex couples I've worked with, of like, well, you don't work, right? And it's almost this power play. And it's like, well, if that's a problem for you, let's talk about a balance that would be important to you, and finding ways of what's their strength, like what's happening, right? Reevaluating their strength while they're at home.
And how do we value both roles?
Yeah.
Neither role is more valuable, right? But again, playing to strengths, playing to teamwork. We really want to keep it centric on how do we operate well, whether it is someone staying home or not, or we're both working or not, or I'm responsible for all the outside stuff and you've got all the inside stuff or not. It doesn't matter. At the core, do we feel like a team?
Yes.
Do we acknowledge that both of us are playing a role and it feels balanced for both of us? If any of those are no, time to talk about it.
And you could be balanced for a moment and it changes because situation changes. That's okay. Yeah. And I keep going back, cultural narratives. Ask yourself, why do you value? Because in the United States, it's working over staying at home for sure. That's what is the narrative. So why do you value it? Like, why do you not value staying at home? Right. And that's like, why? Like, I don't even have an answer for that.
Dig deep. Where do your beliefs of what teamwork roles should look like? Where do those values come from?
Yeah, because values are driving and influencing the things that we engage in.
Sure.
Right? Like male culture. Oh, I value cars because, that's a manly thing. So then I'd have to take on the maintenance. Do you? And if you don't, what does your partner say about that? We have to be very careful of the language we're using and how it's influenced by narratives when we're talking about balance, because it can be very demeaning when these roles don't necessarily align perfectly with the cultural narratives.
Teamwork is not an easy thing. It's not easy to talk about. It's not easy to find that quote unquote perfect rhythm for teamwork. It is a work in progress, but the key here is talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Talk about those cultural narratives. Talk about your beliefs, about how it feels for you to give up your job, to work a job, to take on child rearing. We have to be able to be open with our partner in order for teamwork to succeed. And in order for a relationship to succeed, we need teamwork.
Yeah. And I do want to go back to what you said about finances, right? With the unpaid position of being a stay-at-home parent. In the United States, it's unpaid. How do you navigate balance in finances? And it's rhetorical for you. But in general, that's a question that you have to ask yourself. If you're going to be the primary kind of moneymaker in the home, there has to be something discussed with the partner to figure out what's going to be comfortable, because you automatically feel in a one down position if you're not bringing anything financially, because in
like a tangible resource
in a capitalist culture, it very much is like the primary resource of value. And at the same time, someone could argue you're literally raising our kids. Like, you're the single most important influential piece in their development.
You're creating
Humans, right? But somehow what you bring home is more important financially. And so that is a very, very important discussion if you're in a situation where there's a sole financial provider, is how can you find balance and how can you find value and work together to find value with the stay at home. And, sometimes there's couples I worked with where they will switch roles when they can, right? So the stay-at-home parent will back off and the person who's working will take days off and do the stay-at-home parent stuff to value. And I've had couples be like, I did not know and realize on a day-to-day basis that mental tax. I could not do that to how much they're doing it. And they just gained a different respect by putting themselves in their
Absolutely.
shoes because they were able to.
There's no harder job to me. I was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and there is no harder job to me than being a stay-at-home parent.
It is very, very hard.
It is hard. At the core of this, teamwork. We want to set good examples for our kids if we have kids of what teamwork looks like. We want to create healthy relationships, create trust, create support. That is through these conversations of teamwork. Teamwork doesn't mean everything is even. It means that we are capitalizing on each other's strengths, trying to grow a little bit in our growing edges, but really trying to create balance and however that looks for your household, which might be different than your friend, than your parents, than all the people around you. And that's okay.
And sometimes you're going to hate your teammate and you're going to be really mad at them. That's a good time to go back to the locker room and another game plan. There's nothing wrong with going back to the locker room, going back to the drawing board, finding a new plan. I mean, that's part of it. This is evolving. There isn't just a set plan. We got to have all the structure because I'm anxious. And as long as we continue to do the same thing, that same thing may not work all the time. And it won't work all the time because of things changing and adapting. And especially with kids, they're developing. So needs change, right? Labor changes and requirements and
sports seasons, school seasons,
all of it, right? So thinking about that in particular is important when we normalize the fact that you're not always going to get along with your partner or teammate, and that's okay.
That's okay.
Go back to the drawing board, the locker room.
Well, this has been Relationships Inside Out, where today we talked about teamwork. How do we foster teamwork and nourish teamwork such that we both feel balanced and good in our relationship? As always, if anyone has any questions or topic suggestions, please feel free to email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com. Thanks.
Thanks.